you're from Cologne. Like people listen to this, like Cologne, that must mean Kolsch. So can you print one? Can you say Kolsch? Can you teach us how to say Kolsch?
Yeah, that was.
I still can't say it right, but.
Yeah, just when I moved in, I think on like the second or third night, I went to Frankfurt Hall, saw that they have it on the menu, and then very naively went up, and I'm like, oh, can I have a Zion Kölsch? Because it's pronounced Kölsch, like it has the O with the two dots on top, the umlaut, and it took me like 5 or 6 attempts to finally realize, okay, it's not Zion Kölsch.
At the German beer hall, you're not going to just like some random bar that has this.
At least at Brauhaus Schmitz, they were showing the Euros. There you can get a proper Radler, and they understand most of the time if you pronounce the names very German.
Welcome back to the BrewedAt podcast. I'm your host, Richie Tevlin, joined as always by Evan Blum. And tonight we have a special guest, my roommate. So we'll do something a little bit different. So we will have, I guess, Rich from Two Locals on, but, last minute running in the tap room, things happen. And he has to go to the tap room to deal with some issues there tonight. So I'm sure we'll hear all about that when he comes on next. But, yes, I have my roommate on. Like, why do I have my roommate on? So I guess we'll get into like a little bit about like who you are, why we're having you on here, and kind of like, how you, kind of interact with beer. Like, why are you coming on a craft beer podcast? So I guess I should say you're a PhD candidate at Temple, studying the history of Philadelphia.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the history of Philadelphia from the 1960s onwards, and specifically how the city reacted to the sexual revolution and how this played out in public. And so there's the one side of that, which is the growth of a openly queer community who then kind of found their neighborhood or built their neighborhood in the gayborhood. And then the other half of that is adult entertainment opening all throughout the city. And I kind of think that's already the point where we started talking a lot about this and like the intersection with that to bars, to taverns, and to drinking culture in general.
Exactly. Like, we come back, from a bar and like start, just talking about what we're, like, I'm opening up a brewery, and then you have so many interesting things to say about, like, the bar culture in Philadelphia, and, we just kind of get on these tangents, and I'm sitting there, like, in our living room, like, we're literally just doing a podcast right now. So I knew I wanted to get you on here.
On film.
Exactly. So thank you for jumping on last minute.
Of course, my pleasure.
And your name is Max.
Max, exactly.
Yes. Max Gaida?
Yeah.
Yes. I think we missed that. But that's because
we're roommates. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So it's all good.
Cool. So I guess you are part of a program that then sends students over from your home university.
Exactly, yeah. I go to the University of Cologne, and our universities both realized Philadelphia and Cologne have a lot of similarities, kind of cities that are pretty big but are, in the shadow of some larger cities, you could say. Both of the universities in the middle of the city as well. And then my professor and a professor at Temple University became good friends, decided to start this exchange program. And now I'm the first PhD to come here. Originally, I was supposed to stay from January until like 2 weeks ago. And right away in February, I moved to Fishtown. I start going out more. I start doing my research here, really loving Temple, really loving the city. Speak to my advisor here and tell him I got to stay in this place. And then got a job starting in September at Temple for another 9 months.
That's awesome.
So I guess, you're kind of writing your thesis right now. So I guess I want to, I have lots of questions for you, but, you are the literally expert on this. Do you want to start from, the beginning of, what is it, the 50s or 60s and kind of, explain what the basis of your thesis is, and we can kind of go from there?
Yeah. So I could even, in typical historian manner, start a little bit earlier.
Okay.
But essentially, Philadelphia had what I would regard its heyday around the 1930s, 40s, and early 50s, when the city was really booming, especially during the war. There were lots of sailors coming in here. And that also had its side in entertainment. So there was a lot of entertainment along what's now the Avenue of the Arts, so Northern Broad Street. Arch Street was a little bit seedier, known as the Barbary Coast back there, with some attempts to clean out the area because someone got stabbed and there were a few fights between sailors, and a typical kind of 1930s, 40s story. And what I then look at is how this story turns around starting in the 50s with deindustrialization and suburbanization, so kind of what we know as the urban crisis, when Philadelphia starts having real big issues with people, so many people leaving the city that there's derelict buildings, there's not enough taxes to really do, run municipal services anymore.
Yeah.
And then that intersects with the sexual revolution.
Okay.
And so suddenly in the 60s, there's this moment where the city is taking a nosedive, and at the same time, with loosened laws and loosened morals, there's lots of adult entertainment opening everywhere. And what I'm looking at is kind of how that intersects then in people's minds, how they see those two things, the loosening morals as like a downfall of the city and a downfall of America. And the thesis that I've now started to develop is that the city was never comfortable with any of this, and so really heavily fought all of these theaters, bookstores, strip clubs, etc., which is why I think people from our generation wouldn't even think of this anymore. I mean, there used to be Locust Street. Now the heart of the neighborhood used to be known as lurid Locust Street. There were shops out there with like topless pictures just in the storefront advertising their wares. There were women walking the streets and their hustlers standing somewhere around the corner. Was even a dangerous area. In the early 80s, a cop was shot and killed there. Art Street had a lot of the same, so that old Barbary coast kind of continued its reputation. And so what I argue is that the city, because it was never comfortable with this, fought this wholesale, while at the same time an openly queer community was kind of able to find its space in the city and kind of able to fight out this neighborhood where they presented like a respectable form of sexuality.
And it's so close to Center City, which we've talked about this before, like most gay neighborhoods are not that close to like the government center of the city. So like the fact that this community was flourishing and was flourishing so close to where these people were kind of fighting both these things is like very interesting.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Philadelphia very fascinating compared to a place like San Francisco. A lot have been written about that. That's probably the number one city when you think of queer people in the United States. Yeah. And I think it's precisely that. Like one local businessman once talked about it and said that the neighborhood is 2 good golf strikes away from City Hall. And I think that's like really true. And it's not only the political closeness, but also just thinking economically speaking. On the other side of like mirroring kind of the neighborhood, you have Rittenhouse Square, richest or one of the richest neighborhoods in the city. Yeah. Penn Center, this huge redevelopment that was hailed as like a restart for the city with really expensive rent. And on this like prime real estate, somehow people were able to fight out their own neighborhood. And I think it's precisely the story that they weren't welcomed necessarily with open arms, but the city was happy to have them gentrify lurid Locust Street.
They saw it almost as a better option of the two.
Exactly. And it was, especially at that time, it was mainly white gay men with the kind of classical, if they were in a relationship, double income, no kids, so a lot of money to spend. And the city was, and if you look at the demographics of Philadelphia, they only started turning really in the 2000s, slowly with people moving back in. Yep. But 60s, 70s, 80s again with the crack epidemic, the city was hemorrhaging citizens. And so they were really happy to have anyone there and kind of then were able to tolerate, because a lot of council members, a lot of city leaders were still at least, in private homophobic. Yeah. They were able to tolerate that and say, at least it's someone, at least it's not strip clubs, at least it's, well-spoken people we can somehow interact with, who have like a political agenda, who we can work with, and we're happy for that neighborhood to grow.
So what was really the start of that? Was it like 1 or 2 businesses? Was it like an individual that kind of led the charge for like that neighborhood, or?
I mean, some people can place it like on the opening of Giovanni's room, not the first, but typical kind of Philadelphia story, not a city of first but of seconds, the second gay bookstore in the country after New York. Now the oldest one after the one in New York closed. That's like one historic moment. But the neighborhood as like an entertainment neighborhood, which it had been since probably the end of the 19th century, always had a little bit of a queer vibe. Okay. So Tavern on Camac, kind of way back on Camac Street, a little bit hidden. That bar, probably already in the 1920s, you could call it like a hidden gay bar.
Cool, I didn't know it was that old. It's some of these bars, I think in Philadelphia, like they're just bars at this point, but like you don't realize that like they're generations and generations old.
And have this like through line of history, even with changing owners, with changing city. that there's always kind of similar stories and ups and downs there.
Cool. So, I mean, we had talked about, like, one of the big things that you're looking at is, like, I guess, bar citations, or, you know, like, what, I mean, you as a historian, like, you are a PhD, like, you're not just going on Wikipedia and figuring this out. Like, you're writing your thesis by going to the archives of Philadelphia and, like, looking through, like, primary source information. Like, what are some of the specific things that you're looking at?
Yeah, so like on the bar regulations,
Yeah.
One, like the Liquor Control Board is this massive institution,
Yep.
I think probably still today, that, you know, can decide the fate of a bar, and especially before the sexual revolution was heavily interested in kind of policing the sexual line. So not
Okay.
just kind of homosexual, that was more hidden and more an actual police thing where the cops would just raid these bars, crack some skulls, arrest some people, ruin their lives, but also, you know, straight establishments. And so what I was looking at, Temple has these great archives and they have all of the Liquor Control Board records. And I was looking at specifically kind of sexualized violations. So in bars, you weren't allowed to have, for a very long time, women working behind the counter unless they were related to the bar owner. And that was all about this idea.
Didn't that, like, that would happen, like, way too late? That was, like, in the...
Yeah, that was happening until I think the law got overturned in the early 70s on a state level.
Insane.
Wasn't really enforced anymore in
Okay.
the 60s. But the idea was, and this is like always a story with alcohol, that, you know, alcohol lowers your inhibitions. And so we need to protect these women from the men drinking there, because if they're working there, they're going to either be seduced or they're going to be harassed or whatever. And that's why the law said only the family members. I think also with that, like, paternalistic idea that if it's his wife or if it's the bar owner's daughter, he's going to, you know, defend her honor from her,
Yeah.
from the customers. And so, like, I was looking, even 1965, they'd have some of that. Entertainers weren't allowed to mingle with the customers because, again, then that line becomes too close to say, what kind of entertainment are they offering?
And when you say entertainment, is that, like, kind of cabaret stuff, or is that just literally servers and, like, kind of like...
Singers,
Singers,
musicians, comedians, singers. I think especially when it comes to, like, musicians, because, of course, music can also be kind of romantic or seductive.
So events were, like, probably really hard to come by back then too.
No, they were super common. That's the
Okay.
thing. It
So
was
maybe it was, like, they were super common, like, that was just, like, where everybody went kind of all the
yeah,
time, is what you're saying?
and the policing was also super common. But then the one thing, and that's why I was trying to map it out, a lot is happening in North Philadelphia, not a lot is happening in South Philadelphia. And that's the famous payola. The gay equivalent is called gayola. So, you know, you have your beat cop and you're paying him off to make sure that your bar doesn't get policed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at these records because, the argument is it's still not quite there, but there's a lot more policing in North Philadelphia. And I think that's happening because at this moment in history, the neighborhood is transitioning from a, like, ethnically white to a majority African American.
Yeah.
And so the cops are less willing to take money there. You know, in South Philly, the police officers are often from the same neighborhood. You know each other. You put a little bit of money in his pocket and he'll look away, whatever's happening. The same isn't happening in North Philadelphia, where the police is, like, very focused on policing also the racial lines.
Yeah, like, not just the sexual revolution, but kind of like
Exactly.
social revolution kind of.
Yeah, all of that, yeah.
So, I mean, we had talked about also, like, you know, the weird angle on this is that, like, you're from Germany also. So, like, you're seeing the difference between, like, American bars and German bars, and Philadelphia bars are so much different than, like, New York bars and, like, kind of the neighborhood local spots. So we had talked about, like, you know, like, Philadelphia, and especially the bars back in the day, like, there used to be a lot more bars all over the place. And Philadelphia held on to that, I think, for a while, maybe longer than some other cities. But, like, can you kind of speak on...
Yeah, so this is very much a story of, like, changing technology and changing economics, where bars used to be the place after work. Because going home, you either have to spend time with your family, which, you know, kind of your stereotypical late 19th century man might not want to do, but also there was nothing to do at home. You'd listen to your kids run around, or you'd chat with your neighbors on the stoop, okay. But then in a bar, you wouldn't only get something to drink, you'd often get some food, and there'd be entertainment. Mm-hmm. So just singers, could be just someone on a piano, and then that, you know, made these places so much more spread everywhere throughout the city. It was just the place to go in the evening. with the rise of the radio already, we have music kind of having it harder, and then television kills that off entirely. Because you can go home, switch on the TV, and you're entertained. And you don't have to spend any money.
The rise of this also, I mean, just bringing it back to beer also, kind of when that happened was when beer in aluminum cans started to come also. So then you were able to drink not at a bar, and I don't know like which came first, the chicken or the egg, but then you're able to drink beer at home. So it went from being like you had to go to a bar to not just socialize but to drink, but now you have the ability to socialize or have fun at home and drink at home consistently.
Exactly. I didn't know that about the beer, but I think that's just as important a development.
It's I've read a lot of books on like the history of like English beers, like the English bar scene, and it's like that was like a big issue, or it's just like it kind of killed like whole economies that were kind of based around these local bars.
Which is because the college in Cologne, you used to be able to go, and some of the very, very old bars still have this, and they'd have like a special window where you could get like a 2 or a 4 liter bottle from like I'm forgetting the English word, from the tap, and they'd fill that from the cask, because that's also, I mean, 50s is a little bit late, but with beer, of course, the big story also being refrigeration, that you need all of those different economic factors, technological factors to come together in this historic moment. And then what happens from the 50s on is it becomes so much less profitable to run a bar. Less and less people show up, more and more people spend their evenings at home. And so in some of these places like Locust Street, what these bar owners realize, or kind of forced into realizing, is there's still one form of entertainment that TV doesn't give you, and that's naked people. And that's kind of how that happens. And a lot of the bar owners say this, like it's always striking when you're doing history and you think there's so much deep investigation, I have to read all of these. No, they were interviewed in newspapers. They just, the Inquirer would send a journalist to go to these streets and he'd interview the guys. And you'd have someone stand there and he'd say, hey, honestly, if I could just open up a bar, I'd just open up a bar, but no one's coming. So I put a woman dancing on the table and I have customers, and that's how I feed my kids. Like, there's nothing to it.
So, I mean, that happened. Like, we talked about, like, like you said, like, we don't see in the city strip clubs or, like, these porno theaters around. But, like, that kind of came about because, like, these bars didn't exist, but, like, what you couldn't do at home was then see these. But then the rise of the internet and, like, all these other things, now you have access to this at home. So, like, you had even talked about, like, in New York, how, like, Giovanni cleaning up, like, Times Square, like, a lot of that was just, like, time and place. The internet came about, and like these things don't have to be out in the open.
Was there more of a crackdown on the like sexualization of people like attracting to bars, or was it more than the up in technology, TV, not internet, but like that kind of luring people away from that mentality of selling the aspect of a bar?
I think it's hard to say, actually.
Yeah.
And I think I'll have to do more research into that. I think the bar aspect is always important because of, especially in a state like Pennsylvania with its like weird laws and like the relationship that America has to alcohol, and how much that is always seen as like this root of so much, vice, that it lowers inhibitions, and that makes, turns a good person bad. And so there's a lot of like effort done into the policing there. But it also has a lot to do with just the front-facing value of it. That in a city like Philadelphia, which at least city leaders pride itself on their long history and does rely to a large extent on the tourism dollars, it's not that great if you have, a little Midwestern family walking from Independence Mall to City Hall, past all of these theaters, past maybe drunken people stumbling out of one of these theaters or one of these bars. And also what doesn't exist at all anymore, at least in America, so-called bust-out joints. So there are a lot, like, you might know these Japanese hostess, like Japanese hostess clubs. So you go there, and you're paying for time with a woman who, will flatter you and will, treat you like you're a king, but you're paying for the time with the drinks. And so you're incredibly expensive whiskey. In Japan, it's always, like, bottles of champagne that'll cost, like, $70 a pop.
And there just happen to be attractive women there that will flirt with you.
Exactly, and entice you to drink more and more.
Okay.
And the city, from the 50s onwards, really tried to fight that because of tourism and especially because of conventions. because they said the problem, and again, like the
Like actual conventions, like the convention center.
yeah,
you're talking
because
about? Okay.
that's always been like a large part of the city's economy.
Okay.
And that's also like very forward facing and front, can make like a national reputation.
Definitely, because people are coming in from all over the country.
Exactly. And so what the police was really interested about, and the police commissioner said this, is not your local who knows what he's getting. Like, because, if a guy wants to spend an evening paying for a watered down whiskey and he's paying 4 times the price, but he knows that he'll have some woman in his ear, that's fine. The problem was Locust Street, especially, so close to the then later convention center, your regular conventioneer could stumble into that, get ripped off, and then be really upset. Oftentimes, these bars would get them so drunk that then they take their credit card or their checkbook or whatever. The old tricks that we hear about now, visiting, like traveling abroad,
Yeah.
you're warned about. And then the problem becomes their wives get involved, and they say they never went to that place, and Philadelphia is so terrible, and the city really didn't like that reputation, and so they really tried to fight that.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's like this weird. I mean, us coming to living in Philadelphia, like we don't think about this. We just see like, oh, Philadelphia's the dive bar city, but like there's like all this history beyond like how it became, kind of what it is.
It's something that I'm curious, like, you're pretty new to Philly in the sense of like the last year or so. Was there any like, I don't know, stereotypes, but like any surprises about like coming to Philly as like just like a city or just to the U.S. and like what's your experience in that? Because that's so interesting. I just went abroad to like Italy and Spain, and like it's some of my favorite stuff to like explore and like just learn about the new cities. So I'm like curious what your perspective is.
I mean, like, I don't want to say any things that get people upset with me here. But like,
people like us, we don't care. Let's hear.
And the opposite is actually the case, because I do think the city once again is struggling a lot with its reputation. You only have to mention Kensington, and that's the first thing. The first thing any European, before I went here, my family, my friends, they'd Google, okay, what's going on in Philadelphia? That's the first thing that pops up. And then coming here, I was like very positively surprised at how much I actually like the city and how much
we live in Kensington.
Yes.
Like there's not that issue where we're living.
And how much like one neighborhood doesn't like define a city.
Yeah.
And how much, although the city does have like a rough edge, and I have to say I enjoy that a lot. Like I do joke sometimes, and because I was a big fan of It's Always Sunny in Philly, and I joke that only since moving here I've realized that is actually like a documentary about some people who live here. I always expect to just be randomly stopped on the street by people doing like the same kind of hijinks, but I do really love that, and that's like one of the parts I find so much fun. The city doesn't take itself so seriously. The people don't take, except maybe sports, but that's a different issue. But otherwise, people don't take the city, and that's the same in Cologne.
Self-depreciating city.
Yeah, like Cologne.
That's a good way to put it.
Cologne was completely destroyed during the war.
Yeah.
And so it's a very ugly city. All of the buildings were built really quickly in the 1950s, and then we have those like 1970s. That there's very few pretty places. It's pretty dirty. It's a very dysfunctional, like, sounds a lot like this place here, right? And so I love that, coming here and not being in a place like New York where people are so, in love with the city and themselves, but somewhere that, you can make a few jokes and everyone's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's funny also, like, the first couple, I'm like, I can't go out right now. I'm like so busy, like trying to set up my own thing and like just keep my head above water right now. But like when you're going out, like you're going to like the L Bar and you're coming back from like the L Bar, like you're just coming in from like out of town, like you don't want to like explore Center City, but like then I'm thinking like, no, you're getting the full Philadelphia experience. Like you're studying abroad, you're coming here, and you're seeing what people in Philadelphia are doing. You're going to the L Bar, you're going to Tattooed Moms, you're going to like seeing all the Cafe Bardot. It's like you're seeing all these places that are like the local Philly dive bars, and I think it's very cool that like you're kind of seeing like the citywide special.
Yes, and I mean that's like the two things. That the one is I'm here as like a grad student on that kind of salary, so the citywide special is saving a lot of nights. And then also though I love those kind of places in Cologne as well, because that is where you get to meet like people. No, I wouldn't want to make the distinction between people from here and not here, but you get to like meet people. Like
Definitely.
You get the experience of the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's people that
Like the heartbeat of the city.
Exactly. Although of course, if I just sit down and screw the accent up a tiny little notch, or wear like my Germany kit, then it's still very easy to meet people, but still.
That's fun. So I mean, you're from Cologne. Like people listening to this, like Cologne, that must mean Kolsch. So can you Can you say Kolsch? Can you teach us how to say Kolsch?
Yeah, that was.
I still can't say it right, but.
Yeah, just when I moved in, I think on like the second or third night, I went to Frankfurt Hall, saw that they have it on the menu, and then very naively went up, and I'm like, oh, can I have a Zion Kölsch? Because it's pronounced Kölsch, like it has the O with the 2 dots on top, the umlaut, and it took me like 5 or 6 attempts to finally realize, okay, it's not Zion Kölsch.
At the German beer hall, you know, like you're not going to just like some random bar that has this. Like this is we're advertising as the premier German beer hall in Philadelphia.
That's crazy. See, I wouldn't have known that.
But it's also, it's also fine. I don't. At least at Brauhaus Schmitz, they were showing the euros. There you can get a proper Radler, and they understand most of the time if you pronounce the names very German.
So let's get into like some of the German stuff. So you're from Cologne. So Cologne, the only place that you're legally allowed to make Kolsch in Europe is in Cologne.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to be able to see the cathedral.
Exactly, yeah. We're very proud of our cathedral, one of the only buildings left standing after the war. Funnily enough, once the tallest building in the world, and no one here is able to guess, even though it's like strikingly obvious, because why else would I ask, what usurped the Cologne Cathedral to be the tallest building in the world?
Empire State?
No, even more like Philadelphia, obvious.
Oh, City Hall.
Yeah, City Hall, which is crazy, but City Hall is like a few feet taller.
Wow.
So it's funny that I have that like connection, but so we're super proud of our cathedral, and the law is that, it's like champagne, it's like these other brands, or these other names.
Yeah.
You have to be able to somehow from your brewery be able to see a part of the cathedral, and the largest company, Reisdorf, because of rising rents in the city, expanding, built a new mega brewery really far in the outskirts of the city. And if you're at the tallest part of the building, you can just about make out the tip of the cathedral. And so the city said, yeah, that's fine. You can officially make a Kolsch.
Yeah, it's cool. Like, puts a limit on the number of breweries that can make Kolsch.
Yeah.
And, you said, like, it's, like, we think of, like, these, there must be, like, every single brewery is, like, 800 years old. But, like, you said, like, even within the city and this, like, very, cultural, traditional, beer style, there are, like, new brands that are somehow emerging. So, like, the new hot brand this summer that has been coming around, like, we're talking about on the way here.
Yeah, there's this new brand it really just appeared. I don't even think they did, like, a marketing push. But it's in a building that used to house, or urban legend says, in the medieval ages had a torture chamber. And so they also have the date of like the founding of the brewery of like 1344, which is probably nonsense because Kolsch has only been brewed since the end of the 19th century. But anyways, it's like a marketing thing. And the beer is called Schreckenskammer, which means like chamber of horrors. And it just has a kind of like a cool logo, like not
that
very.
That place would crush right now in the craft beer scene right now of like making traditional German beer styles, like something like that. Anywhere in the United States would be.
Yeah, and it just
cleaning up.
And the crazy thing is, it just has like a very normal tasting Kolsch. Like there's nothing special about it. But somehow more and more people started drinking it, and like by the point that I started drinking and told my friend like, oh, this is so cool. The people from the cooler neighborhoods, they were like, yeah, we've been drinking that since last summer. Like, come on, get with it.
Trendy since the 1300s.
Yeah, really.
So does that make the Kolsches that are brewed in the U.S. just like not actual Kolsch?
So this says Kolsch style ale. So we're drinking a Kolsch style ale from, was it Wayward? Wild Air Beer Works in Jersey. This is in Jersey, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so, this is fairly good, but, like, as you were saying, like, this looks like not like a Kolsch, like a...
But it looks like, because that's the other beer that got really popular, this is like the traditional late 19th century, before the clarification process was invented, type of Kolsch. And the second largest brewery, Gaffel, 2 or 3 years ago, brought out this as like their new summer drink, also has become incredibly popular. So they're like... knowing it unknowingly probably, but they are playing into the trends right now in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also it's interesting to hear, like, we think that, like, as Americans, like, Europe is like some like fairy tale thing, like they're just doing very traditional things, like, oh, they're probably drinking like the same traditional German beers over and over, but like you're saying, like, you guys, when you guys go out, you guys actually are drinking Kolsch all night, or starting off with Radlers and then moving on to Kolsch, and it's just like the whole city is buying, like by like not just you talked about this before, not just young people, but like you talk about the 80-year-old woman crowd before. These are like two different conversations, but it's like the whole city is kind of actually drinking this and like keeping the tradition alive of this, which is very, very
Cologne is like a bit like Philadelphia, like very, very proud of our local heritage. We have the largest Mardi Gras celebration in the world, which like the city revolves entirely around that, and culture is like a huge part of the city. And so if you like, we go to a bar, or we even go to a restaurant, we're sitting around the table, you're asking people like if they're drinking a Kolsch or something else. And the standard would be if the three of us were in and the bartender would be seeing us on the other side, we just have to, show him 3 and he'd know 3 Kolsch.
Like here in Philly, like we're like, oh, this is so cool. You can just ask for a lager and they'll like bring you a Yingling. But like this is like, you just have to show them numbers and they're giving you your beer.
And then the next thing is that the glasses are tiny. They're like always made fun of by the rest of Europe and especially Germany. They have 200 milliliters. Yeah, I mean, you're the brewers, you can do the calculations maybe, but it's like 3 or 4 sips, very, very small, so that the beer doesn't lose its carbonation and stays nice and cold and fresh.
Evan will love this because Evan loves flights. But
yeah, but then the thing is that people will make fun of that and say,
it's like
what a tiny glass,
beer.
But they serve them at a pace that you can't imagine.
Yeah,
because they
it's
give
always
you,
fresh.
And they give you until, like if you're done, you have to put your glass down and put your coaster on top. And then they won't serve you a new one. Until you do that, even if you're midway in conversation, if no one's paying attention, they'll come out with like a tray of Kolsch. They have like 15 on there and just walk up to all of the tables and go, bam, 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 here's the next 3. They do like little marks on the coasters so you know how much you paid and you'll go. And so that can, especially people not from the city, can really underestimate if you go to a place that serves it quickly and you have some friends who can drink quickly, how quickly you can, without noticing it, have the entire coaster full, and you're just thinking, wow, how many beers was that now?
Just adding up.
Yep.
So we had talked, I just mentioned this, like, kind of the beer scene, like, will you say, like, what's the biggest difference? Like, people in Germany just drink a lot more beer. Yeah. And it's not like you say, like, young people, like, when you're in college, you're drinking a lot. It's not like people in Germany are, like, excessively drinking more than, like, kids in college. But that kind of same level of drinking keeps going until, like, you talk about, like, the 80-year-old woman.
Yeah, it's crowd. Especially there are still very nice neighborhood, like, bars / breweries. They'll have your good traditional German food, like a good schnitzel, some kind of good sausage, all of that. And you'll have, as the evening progresses, a crowd. As they open at 5 o'clock, you might have, like, the senior citizen crowd who show up there, and they'll have dinner. They've been doing this. My grandma, her friends, they grew up in the 30s together. And they were doing this until their late 80s. And they'd show up, and they'd also be drinking the Kolsch. And they'd also be getting, maybe not as plastered as like a college kid, but a pretty good serve on. And then by the time that they're done, then maybe, the little bit younger crowd moves in. And so there are still these like traditional places. And yeah, people drink so much more. Like I couldn't imagine like a group of 80-year-old grandmothers here.
Everyone would stop what they were doing and start taking pictures of them.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be so cool to see.
And then
that's what like we're talking about craft beer, like can't connect with Gen Z. Like let's talk about like the older generation.
Yeah.
This whole generation we're not going after.
How is that like? How do you think they translate that so well? And like if everybody is still drinking Kolsch from like freaking 80 to 20s.
Well, you said it before, like,
it's
right?
wild.
It's like how alcohol, for how the United States treats alcohol. It's like this divisive thing. Like it turns you into a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Like you guys, like your drinking age is 16, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's just you
It's
drink.
just so normalized.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't want to romanticize it at all. Like,
It is
a
lot of drinking.
It's silly because I'm
Still
just
alcohol.
like turning 30, but I still work at university, and so I see like the freshers when the new college kids come in, and it makes me, now that I'm 30, think a little bit about it. But alcohol is so much more, and especially beer, so much more deeply ingrained, culturally speaking, in a city like Cologne, in Germany in general, and with the drinking like at 16. That sets a completely different bar. Where here, and I think there's a lot of conversation to be had on like the pros and cons in both directions. But where in Germany the idea more is to teach people to be like responsible drinkers, as silly as that sounds, but to be like, this is an unavoidable part of our culture that we actually also celebrate, and we like this heritage. but that also comes with a lot of responsibility that you have to figure out. And maybe 16 is quite a young age, I'll say in retrospect, but there is also a difference to the kind of American level of just having kids, especially growing up in like more suburban places, and then throwing them into college and boom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know how many friends that I've seen just they turn 21, they're in or just their first experience in college. You know, you're 18, you're freshman, and people go crazy because they were never allowed to drink, and then they end up in the hospital.
Yeah,
straight up.
Get their stomach pumped,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like also like the way Germany has like held on to the traditional German beer styles. It's like, you know, like you said, it's still people are still doing that every weekend. They're still drinking the same beer styles every weekend. We're like, you know, I just saw in Acme. Acme just switched over, the local Acme in Northern Liberties just switched. When you walk in, their beer aisle used to be all local craft beer up front.
Mm-hmm.
That has all shifted down 10 feet, and it's moved in by not seltzers, by hard iced tea.
Really?
And like, you know, product is like we talked about this. Like when the drinking age is 21, like Germans have been drinking for 5 years at that point. Like they've kind of gotten past this, like, you know, drinking some like artificially flavored fruit water that gets you drunk. Like they don't need to do that. So, like, you know, they're like mature drinkers at that point. Like it's.
And I also think there's a lot to say that, like, in general, my sister, who also lives in the States, she always says the country is more dynamic, for better or for worse. But when things happen, they happen.
Yeah.
Where Germany loves having endless debates and tradition, and so it's has so much of a longer breadth.
Yeah.
And I think also, and this is like absolutely something you will be confronting in the next few years as you're starting your business.
Yeah.
I think there's also the downside to it, to say that these companies have, in Cologne, 3 or 4 Kölsch companies have been able to find their monopoly position and sit on that. And the reason also being that all of these restaurants, in order to serve beer on tap, have to have a contract with the brewery, who then can determine what else they have in their fridges, which, you know, doesn't even open that space for any new type of drink or for craft breweries to enter. And then on top of that, they have all of the stadiums. Like in the stadiums, they serve one beer because that company has the contract with the stadium. What's a lot nicer, I have to add, is that I was at the Phillies game yesterday, and these prices not conducive to like a European sports experience. Because in Cologne, in the stadium, I think you're barely paying $1.50 more than outside.
Yeah, it's the idea of tied houses, where like the bar. This is why we have the 3-tier system, where like beer producers sell to wholesalers that then sell to retailers to like break up that monopoly. And I think that like you can see from both sides, like Germany was able to keep this like very healthy traditional life where like the beer is cheap, everyone's very happy. But you know, in Europe and like especially like, you know, Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch were to like own every single bar. If there wasn't a 3-tier system, Anheuser-Busch would own every single bar in the country because they could sell beer for 30 cents a beer, and they would push everybody else out, or they would just force everybody else out and sell it for still $8 a beer.
Yeah.
But you know, Germany has been able to kind of like keep this system alive that like, you know, they're able to sell the same beer and like, you know, just people are respectful of it. I guess it works. Like here and in England, like I guess it didn't work.
Yeah, and I think especially with Germany, it's just like a historical luck that we have these like regional kind of differences where you can pretty much only sell Kölsch in Cologne and a few surrounding cities there.
Yeah.
And you can only, like, we have a big rivalry with the city of Düsseldorf, who have Alt, which is barely different to a Kölsch. I'll get, you know, thrown on a pyre for saying that in Cologne, but it tastes fine. I've been to the city a lot. This is, you know, no problem. But you can only sell that there. Never the twain shall meet. The same with a lot of the other
and, like,
regional.
the difference is like, you know, like probably like 3 or 4 IBUs and like you know, it's just like nobody knows the difference between this unless you're drinking it all day every day.
But that just also kind of means that you can't have this mega monopolization of the entire country, where, you know, one company just gets the ball rolling and starts to buy up everything, because you still have these localized regions that will just say no.
So is then craft in Cologne very like unheard of?
There's a few bars. There's a very cute one with like just a travel suggestion should any of the listeners ever go to Cologne that has a beautiful little balcony where you look right onto the cathedral, and they have like different craft beers. But otherwise, it's not a big thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because, and I think also because it is so culturally ingrained, you spend a lot less time thinking of it. Either you like the taste or you don't, but there's not a lot of experimentation. It's just something, you're just drinking it while you're going out. You're not going out to drink it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told you this Stone Brewing from California, they opened up a brewery in Germany at like the height of like craft beer exploding everywhere. And they're like, what are we going to do? Like, we're craft beer's literally taking over the world. It's going to be like the new thing that everyone drinks. So they opened up a brewery in Germany, and they made some huge public, spectacle where they like raised a pallet of traditional German beer up with like a crane and dropped it and smashed it. And like traditional German beer is dead, craft beer is here, and it just totally flopped. It didn't resonate with anybody in Germany. Nobody in Germany was drinking the Stone beer, and it was just like even people in the United States were like, it seemed like a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm, too much.
Yeah. There's no need for it. Like the quality of the beer is there, and I think that like part of why craft beer was taking over the United States was there was a lot of not quality beer in the United States.
And I think especially with the like kind of the light beer.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a snob. I do miss my nice Kölsch served in the proper way and all of that. But I'll happily drink a lot of the beers here. But I do see more there that the lagers, and especially Philadelphia I guess has Victory or like, but those places don't have as long and as deep a history.
Yeah, Victory's like 27, 28 years old.
Oh, okay,
like,
well,
they're not 800 years old.
Yeah.
You know?
Or and even like the older breweries, something like a PBR or such, that's like not from the East Coast.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that's, and I mean,
Not
I
as
do.
tied.
I mean, if you'd ask me what my American beer would be, I'd probably say PBR. I don't know why, but
It's the citywide.
yeah, that's true.
So how's like different crafts then been when you came here to try? Is that like just super different? Like I would imagine that being a whole, like it's crazy. Like
Is
there's
it,
certain
like,
things
are there
that go from
IPAs
everywhere.
in Germany or like?
No.
No, not really.
That's
No.
wild.
There's no sours. The first time I had a sour, like, go ahead, brew them. No, I cannot stand them. The first time I had a sour, I just thought, why would you do this? Both to your gut, but also to your stomach. I mean, if you drink like three of
It's
those,
like a
it's,
dessert beer. You can only have a couple of them.
oh my goodness.
Or it's great in a flight, as some might say.
Yeah.
Fair enough. No, yeah, I think especially it's like nearly overwhelming seeing like all of the different options, and then on a weeknight, but also sometimes on the weekend, I am like very basic when it comes to that. I like a good Pils, a good lager. If there's a good Kölsch, I'll take that. And then you look at the entire menu, and it's a little bit like, okay, which name can I pronounce
What
on
are
the
the-
first go?
Yeah, what are the bars like? Are they set up like how Frankfurt Hall is?
In
where it's-
Germany?
Yeah, where they have that many options, or there's only like 3 or 4 options and kind of just...
There's one.
There's one. It's just
I
like
mean-
they literally just serve beer from one brewery at the bars.
Yeah, and a
That's
lot of the
crazy.
like especially the big ones
Yeah.
in like our center city, our downtown, will be run by the breweries themselves, and then the others as well. And then sure, like if you go to other clubs, they'll either have like if they have bottled beers,
Yeah.
which most people don't like because it's like, well, you just have a tap. Like I can drink a
Yeah.
bottle at home, or biggest difference probably, I can drink a bottle on the street. Because that's the big thing. What I think American bars,
Oh, really? You can drink on the street?
you can't just drink. It's an institution. We have a Fußpilz, so like a foot, like it's a word play because a
Yeah.
Pilz is also a fungus, and so the joke is like a Fußpilz, a foot fungus is like a beer you drink on the way to somewhere. Cologne has lots of little bodegas everywhere in the city. And so the standard will be to go bar hopping, where you go to a bar, drink a beer there, then go to a bodega, get a beer to go, walk to the next bar, have a beer there, bodega, beer to go. You'll save some money because at the bodega, a pint of beer costs $2. And you'll get really nice and drunk. And so, like, the bars also have to compete in summer with that people can and are drinking in parks, at the river, outside, walking around.
It creates more competition, so
Yeah.
kind of like, better prices. And you had talked about also kind of like the bar scene in Philadelphia, not just in Philadelphia, but in the United States. It's like very centralized bars. It's like, the neighborhood Pass Young, South Street. There's a couple places, Fishtown. There's a couple places in the city where like there's a lot of bars all kind of centered in one neighborhood. Where Germany is kind of just like a lot of neighborhood bars still spread out all over the place.
And they won't always be the best necessarily. They won't be the place that I'm like I want to go to. But it makes bar hopping, because I really enjoy bar hopping. I don't know, I get too antsy at one place.
Once you've had one beer, it's just like, where are we going next?
Exactly. And so that really works so well in Cologne, because you have then different neighborhoods with different vibes. There's a student vibe. There's our neighborhood is called the Bermuda Triangle, because it used to have like 3 little bars. Very cool area. But you can always, like, there's always a midpoint in between them.
Yeah.
Where here the problem is if you're in the neighborhood and you're trying to get to Fishtown, you have to Uber.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing. It's just
or you'll make it up
man's land.
to 2nd Street. You'll make it up to Bardot, but then you're nearly in Fishtown already, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's tough sometimes. You're just stuck in like a no man's land. I'm looking at my phone and being asked, like, where should we go next? I think, I just moved here. Why should I? I could tell you about the 1950s. Can't tell you about today.
So going back on that, like what were there some bars that stood out that aren't here anymore that like, it's like almost people probably back in the day were like, what, how you never, if they were to time travel, like, what, you've never heard of this place? Were there some bars that kind of stuck out or neighborhoods that aren't around anymore?
That's a good question. I think because of what I look at, like I'll know mostly like kind of the bars that are in the liquor control board violations the most often, and some of those fun places. I haven't found anything yet to be like a large place.
Cool place. I guess those places are still probably around. Maybe I don't know.
One thing I'm saying, like,
have you seen have you read about like McGillen's or anything?
Yeah,
no, I haven't seen their name yet.
Okay.
I think.
Have you been at McGillen's?
Yeah.
Okay. They've been around. I don't even know how long at this point.
It's the oldest bar in the city.
Yeah.
Isn't it not the oldest bar in the country, but they won like some New York Times stuff.
The oldest bar in the country is McSorley's up in New York City.
See?
And they sell
city of first, city of second.
Exactly. And they sell 2 different beers, a dark beer and a light beer, like dark light lager, light lager.
No way, that's cool.
And they come in these little glasses. There's sawdust all over the floor. I think they sell like hot dogs. That's it. They sell like wishbones from like people in World War I and stuff. It's crazy bar, but it's fun just to go in. It's this is the oldest bar in the country.
My McGillen's experience was 2 days after St. Patrick's Day, and they had like a pitcher for some ridiculously low price. So me and my friend said, of course we're gonna drink that, and then it comes out green.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're trying to get rid of their surplus.
It's cheap because they got like the green Budweiser.
Yep. Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
That's funny.
One thing I'm curious about, just like also from you coming to the U.S., the differences in price of a beer, like that's insane, because I saw that in the reverse situation when I went to Europe. I'm like, why is everything so cheap seemingly? And it's just like you're able to just consciously drink more because of it in a lot of ways. You can go through beer quicker.
Yeah, like the beers even in bars will be barely more expensive than if you bought it at a supermarket. I think precisely because of the reason that otherwise you just drink it in a park. The beers in the soccer stadiums will be barely more expensive than if you bought it outside. And I think that's also a big reason, because a soccer game is just 90 minutes plus the 15-minute break. Mm-hmm. And so if they try to raise the prices, as a fan, you can just blast a few quick ones outside, sober up while you're inside, and then once the game is over, go back out. Baseball game, that doesn't really work. And so prices here, different level, and I try to just let that pass by me.
Yeah, there's only a couple stadiums that keep it, cheap. Atlanta Falcons, they serve, like $5 beers or something like that. It's like Costco prices. But for the most part, it's like every beer. Like, I went to some concert in Lincoln Financial Field a couple weeks ago.
The worst.
So it was like $21 for like way oversized Michelob Ultra that's like warm halfway through drinking it.
Yeah. I think it's silly, and I think it's sad. I mean, at least the Phillies are playing really well right now, so the stadium is full. But it's that typical kind of economic story of, oh no, why is no one coming and watching our games anymore? Well, because it's like unaffordable. Yeah. And I don't say you have to like go and drink, but like it makes it a lot more fun.
Some executives sitting up there like, well, yeah, but actually like we priced it at this, like it doesn't matter if there's less people, we're still making more money. But like, part of it is like bringing people together. Like I think that if they cut down on the prices and like made it more of a cultural thing, people would be going to a lot of these like smaller leagues, supporting the union, all these other things.
I mean, the flip side is the sad part about it, of course, that once I'm there and I've pre-gamed the match and I've had the first too expensive beer, of course I will buy the next one as well, because I think that's what they're reckoning.
Yeah, they
visitors like
you.
me. Yeah,
It's possible. Dude, the one time I was at the Link, the beer prices was a difference of $5 from the lower level to the higher level. It was the craziest thing. It was at a concert. It's just like, I don't even know.
It was more expensive on the lower level?
It was more expensive on the upper level.
Oh, because the tickets are cheaper. They're trying to get you.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
They just know everyone on the upper level is just blasted already. They don't notice.
It's like, why are we here? Okay, wait. Here it goes. Yep.
That's funny. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, do you have anything? I mean, you're still writing your thesis, like, but I mean, this was like kind of a great introduction. I mean, not just your thesis, but I think a lot of people find this interesting. Like, people just take for granted the Philadelphia bar scene, but like, there's all this history about like what happened. I thought it was very interesting, so thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. I'm very happy to talk about it, and probably in 3 years, optimistically, I'll be back with the actual book on the table.
Okay,
but
that's
one day I'll be back. Yes.
That's so cool.
Preview to the audiobook.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I think an episode like this, like we had Eric Orlando on, and like people were like, "Why are we having this person on?" But like if you actually go back and like listen to the interview, and like where people like sat through this, like, wait, this is like so much more interesting than like a lot of the other things that we've talked about here. And, like, it's just kind of a different angle that people don't think about with beer.
It was born in Germany. Like, beer was born in Germany. Like, you get such a first.
It's here nor there. It's been around. But yeah, thank you for coming on. And,
my pleasure.
See you at home.
Yeah, see you in a bit.
Cool. So I guess I mean, you don't have a business, but if you want to follow Max online, you want to pump your Instagram or anything?
Not my Instagram. That's private.
Okay. But yeah, Max Gaida, thank you for coming
Exactly.
on.
In a few years, I'll have more to sell.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then you can follow the BrewedAt podcast or BrewedAt online on all social media platforms. Thank you. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Sweet.
Thank you.